Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
Wanda Castro was standing near a tall panoramic window, gazing thoughtfully towards the small, beautiful lake nestled deep within their large, flourishing garden. In that lake, there were enormous carp. "Look, Wanda, what a beauty," Nicandro said, embracing her. "We got them for you. So you can come here anytime and watch our small family." Nicandro smiled and pointed out a couple of exquisite fish, smoothly moving beneath the glassy surface of the water. "Look, the bigger one is me," he continued, "and this beauty with shimmering sides is you, Wanda. His female. His lawful wife. Look how happy they are. Just like you and me, Wanda." For a while, Wanda continued to gaze at the majestic fish, thinking about the fact that she was also swimming in the midst of the unknown waters of her own life. And just like these carp, she didn't remember who she was. She slowly shifted her focus to her reflection in the window. She was tall, of almost model-like height, slender as a birch tree trunk. Wanda possessed truly striking features. A platinum blonde who had turned 25 just last year, she seemed to have stepped straight out of a fashion magazine. Nevertheless, Nicandro claimed that's how they met. He said she used to be a model, planning to leave her tiresome business, while he was a successful banker, overseeing several branches of a major bank in the country. Her husband told her they met at some art exhibition, either dedicated to Impressionism or, on the contrary, something related to folk crafts. Nicandro said he no longer remembered precisely. "I wish I could remember something from all of that," Wanda thought bitterly to herself, "at least something." However much she strained her memory, however hard the businessman husband tried to help her piece together the events of that fateful day when she had a terrible car accident and lost almost all her memory except for her name, she never managed to recall anything beyond that. Her first memory after she had fully regained consciousness was the long road back home. She remembered the cozy interior of a luxurious car, where her husband was driving her to their lavish countryside mansion located in one of the most exclusive and meticulously guarded cottage settlements. Beside her was a middle-aged woman dressed in an exquisite sky-blue three-piece suit. Her hair was immaculately styled, and her makeup could rival that of the English queen herself. She appeared to be around 50, yet her figure was akin to that of a Hollywood star. She was taut, slim, with minimal wrinkles on her beautiful, albeit slightly cold, face. It later emerged that she was Nicandro's mother, Patricia Castro. The banker's mother owned a huge spa complex, hence, there were truly no equals when it came to matters of youth and beauty. At least, not in their city. After they arrived home, Nicandro and Patricia gave her a more detailed account of what had happened to her. "Dear, it's normal that you feel somewhat lost," her husband explained. "The accident you were in with your driver was simply horrendous. The driver died on the spot, and you—" Nicandro hesitated, as if finding it difficult to speak about it, unsure of how to choose the right words so as not to shock his already bewildered wife. Finally, he said, "Wanda, they had to piece you back together almost like a puzzle. Your brain was severely injured, and after several complex surgeries, you had to be put into an induced coma. Otherwise, you wouldn't have survived, my dear." Patricia, sitting right there, silently lowered her eyes and pressed her palm to her forehead, suddenly feeling overwhelmed with anxiety for her daughter-in-law. "You were in a coma for almost half a year," she whispered. "My son visited you every day, hoping that your condition would finally improve enough to wake you up. But initially, the doctors weren't optimistic. They said your chances of recovery were incredibly low. Yet, you did it, Wanda. You conquered death. You're amazing." When Patricia looked at Wanda again, tears filled her eyes. She immediately approached her daughter-in-law and embraced her sincerely. Wanda had no choice but to respond to this gesture with her own and embrace her, but much weaker. "I've been waiting for you, Wanda," Nicandro said in the meantime, wiping tears from the corners of his eyes. "You can't imagine for how long. Mom is right, even the doctors had given up hope, but I still believed that you would come back to me, my dear. Thank God, it happened. Now you're home, and I will never allow you to suffer again. Never." For a brief moment, the young woman looked at her husband, and it suddenly seemed like she had heard something similar before. Yet, it was under entirely different circumstances, and what exactly those were, unfortunately, she couldn't remember at all. Wanda herself felt as if she had slept through several decades in a row, and when she woke up, she found herself in a completely different time and place than where she had fallen asleep. She was constantly plagued by a sense of lethargy, physical weakness, and everything around her seemed somehow off, not as it should have been. Thank you both," Wanda slowly replied, and her mother-in-law finally released her from her overly strong grip. The young woman weakly smiled at both her mother-in-law and husband and added, "I must be very lucky to have such a sensitive and caring family. I will try to remember you. You and everything that happened before this terrible accident. I promise." Patricia exchanged a quick glance with her son, but in the next second, her husband and mother-in-law smiled joyfully. "Of course, dear," Patricia said, taking her hand, "we have no doubt about that. Nicandro will help you fill in all the gaps in your memory that formed after the coma. Honestly, we've prepared for this a bit. So, as soon as you're fully ready to begin, just let us know, all right?" Wanda nodded and unexpectedly asked, "Do you live with us too?" For a moment, her mother-in-law seemed taken aback, as if not expecting such a tactless question from her daughter-in-law. But then, realizing it was just normal, she softened. "That's right, dear. Nicandro, you, and I all live together in this wonderful house. I'll keep an eye on you if you don't mind," she said, looking attentively at her daughter-in-law. "Nicandro is at work most of the day. Besides, he's often set on business trips, sometimes abroad. I think it's better this way." Wanda turned a questioning gaze from hers to her husband, and he confirmed his mother's words. "Darling, you have nothing to worry about," he reassured her. "I'm on a short break right now, but in a couple of weeks, I'll have to return to the office. I want to be absolutely sure that nothing happens to you while I'm not at home." Mom kindly agreed to help me with that, even though she has a lot to do at her spa complex. "I'm sure you and Mom will have a great time together. After all, you two were inseparable even before the accident, like true friends." And he laughed softly, glancing at his mother as if seeking her support. She didn't keep him waiting, and she laughed too. "Absolutely. We will discuss so much, prepare so many delicious things. You won't feel lonely with me, that's for sure." Patricia gently patted Wanda's hand. But it seemed to Wanda that the gesture was somewhat contrived, as if her mother-in-law was emphasizing their friendship, implying that her husband might have slightly embellished their true relationship with Patricia. Either way, at that moment, Wanda didn't say anything, she just smiled at her loved ones. She was truly exhausted, and the only thing she really wanted at that moment was to get some rest. Her relatives didn't object to Wanda's desire and led her to the room prepared for her. Almost a year had passed since then, but the young woman hadn't made much progress in her numerous attempts to remember the life that preceded the accident. It was as if someone deliberately drew an invisible line between these two halves, and everything that came before was irretrievably lost. Her husband helped her as best as he could from his side. He showed her their wedding album, filled with numerous photographs of both the celebration itself and moments from their everyday lives. There they were, happy and incredibly beautiful, posing for the photographer amidst 20 friends. Wanda was dressed in a magnificent designer dress the color of warm milk, entirely embroidered with silk and silvery crystals, forming an intricate pattern reminiscent of Scandinavian ornament. "You look so beautiful here," Nicandro whispered, kissing his wife. Wanda gently moved away. She wasn't ready to get closer to her husband, as much as he might want it. It hadn't been long enough, and she hadn't yet reacquainted herself with him or felt the emotions that, as he claimed, had bound them for the past 3 long years. "I'm sorry," Wanda whispered softly. But her husband seemed not to have heard it. Continuously attempting to be closer to his wife, he tried to embrace her, but she resisted more insistently this time. "No, Nicandro, please, I can't." "But I love you, silly," he replied, slightly disappointed. Looking at him, Wanda understood he had been waiting for this moment for a long time, and now he was left staring back at their wedding photos with a sense of disillusionment. "Fine," he said dryly. "But have you remembered anything, at least? Wanda, you can't hide from me forever. After all, I'm your husband. You don't need to be afraid of me. Maybe if we started living together again, as before, you could quickly not only remember but also feel the same love for me that I experience for you every day." Anxiety gripped Wanda's heart. She desperately wanted her memory to return, and all the beautiful, elevated feelings Nicandro spoke of to flood back. But looking at the colorful pictures, she didn't feel anything at all, not even a hint of a memory. Wanda felt terribly ashamed, so all she could manage was to shake her head negatively. "That's what I thought," her husband spoke in a much colder tone. "Wanda, sometimes it seems like you're not even trying to remember anything. I understand, it's hard for you. But you could at least try to trust me and Mom. Since your memory still doesn't want to return to you. Look at your right hand." Wanda obediently stared at her right hand, where her ring finger was adorned with an engagement ring with a huge pink diamond. Nicandro caught her gaze and gave a short nod. "You see? I gave you this ring on the day I proposed to you. And you were so happy to receive it. So happy that you immediately said yes to me." Nicandro, Wanda tried to justify themselves, but her husband gestured for her to stop. "Please, let me finish," he said. His expression immediately turned sorrowful. "You don't remember now, but we were always part of the same whole. We loved each other so much that we even made special vows at our wedding." Nicandro rummaged through his wife's bathroom and retrieved a large envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of textured paper, neatly creased in half. The sheet displayed a typed love letter, in which Wanda expressed her feelings to her future husband. "Here. Read this carefully," her husband requested. "If even this doesn't awaken a glimmer of memories about how happy we were, then I ask, no, I beg you, Wanda, just believe me. I love you more than anything in the world. And it will always be that way." With these words, Nicandro left his wife's room, leaving her alone with their wedding vows and her far from rosy thoughts. Wanda read the letter from her husband and wept. She cried because she couldn't recall writing it or the emotion she must have felt. The vow was truly beautiful. So pure, so sincere. "Oh God, why do I remember none of this?" Wanda asked herself and the divine being the same question. Why can't I love my husband again and remember him? Even the advice from her mother-in-law didn't help, even though they cooked together in the spacious kitchen and ventured out into town, visiting places that, as Patricia assured her, Wanda loved most. It was all in vain. It seemed like there was a massive stone wall inside Wanda, and it prevented her from delving into the depths of her own memory and remembering everything. Yet Wanda was never left alone for a moment. Either her mother-in-law or Nicandro were always with her. They would occasionally head to the city for outings a couple of times a week. There, they would visit shops, restaurants, and sometimes Nicandro tried to spend time with her by going to theaters, cinemas, and exhibitions. Wanda was grateful for her husband's efforts, but she couldn't understand why she couldn't do the same things on her own, without his presence. She longed for a bit of freedom, personal space. She futilely hoped that if she could be alone with her thoughts, her memory might return faster. "No, darling, that's out of the question," Nicandro repeated to her again and again. "You're still too weak, and you don't fully control yourself. What if you get dizzy or, God forbid, lose consciousness again and fall into a coma? My dear Wanda, I couldn't bear that, you know it." "Nicandro," the woman stubbornly argued, "I'll have to venture out into the world alone sooner or later. You can't lock me up in our house forever." At the mere thought of this, Wanda shuddered. She suddenly realized she couldn't stand confined spaces and solitude. Nicandro, upon seeing his wife's reaction to his words, immediately became nervous. His eye twitched as he was irritated. "What's the matter, Wanda? Did you remember something?" he oddly asked. "No," she replied. "Why do you ask?" Her husband relaxed and said more gently, "It seemed like you felt something new," Nicandro said. "Perhaps you remembered how we used to argue in a similar way." Wanda shook her head negatively. "Not entirely, but you're right. I realized that I can't be alone for too long." At that moment, something pushed Wanda from within, and she looked closely at her husband. "Nicandro, why hasn't anyone from my friends called me even once during all this time? Do I not have any friends? On the phone you gave me, there's no one in the contacts list except you and Patricia. And what about my parents? Where are they, Nicandro?" There were so many questions that Nicandro inadvertently began pacing around the room where they were talking. It was just one of those evenings when they were planning to attend the premiere of a play from the capital that had arrived in their town on tour. The man visibly perked up, now and then adjusting his emerald cufflinks out of nervousness, pretending to fix his appearance. "What's the matter, dear?" Wanda didn't understand. "Is there something you haven't told me yet?" "Nicandro, I won't leave here until I know the whole truth." Nicandro nervously glanced at his wife, and an unpleasant feeling surged within her. A sense that he clearly concealed something from her. "Actually, it's not an inappropriate time for this conversation," Nicandro finally said. "We're about to head to the theater, and here you are asking about parents and friends. Let's talk later." Wanda felt a sudden surge of anger and irritation. She forcefully stomped her foot on the plush carpet. "But I want to know, Nicandro. Be more compassionate. I've been wandering in the dark for a year now, without realizing who I am. I didn't ask because I thought it would be too hard for me and because I thought I'd remember everything on my own. But nothing is working, Nicandro. I don't know what to do next, how to get my memory back." Wanda felt her body start to tremble. Hysteria was setting in, and her husband fortunately noticed it. Nicandro rushed to her and hugged her tightly, trying to warm her and calm her trembling. Wanda felt like a taut, resonating string. She couldn't control her own body. "Shoo, shoo," he soothed her, stroking her back. "That's what I was talking about. It's too soon for you to be alone. I hoped that you'd be able to piece together the most important memories little by little." The man sat her down on the bed and, in a soft but mournful tone, said, "Your parents passed away a long time ago, Wanda." "What? How?" the sobbing girl could only manage to ask. Her husband nodded affirmatively. "It was an unfortunate accident during a hiking trip. Your mom and dad loved mountain outings and often went kayaking through wild river areas. One day, their boat didn't make it through one of the rapids and capsized." Wanda looked at her husband, and her eyes were filled with tears. "Have they drowned?" she asked. He nodded sadly and gently stroked Wanda's cheek. The river was very cold. Moreover, the current in those parts was extremely strong. Their death was inevitable. "I'm sorry, dear, I truly am." Wanda burst into tears and buried her face in her husband's shoulder. "God, what a nightmare. How long ago did this happen?" "Long ago, dear. You were only 20 at the time. You told me about it yourself." Nicandro tenderly stroked her head and whispered soothing words in her ear. Then he spoke cautiously. "As for your friends, I got you a new phone because your previous one was damaged in the accident. It doesn't have any other contacts since I didn't want anyone bothering you unnecessarily during your recovery." Wanda started to calm down a bit and, wiping away her tears, said, "Right. I didn't even think about that. I'm sorry, Nicandro. I feel ashamed that I could have thought poorly of you. I really did think that you were hiding something from me." Her husband just smiled and affectionately continued, "If you want to meet up with your friends, I'll share your new number with them. But please make sure to stay in touch during your outing. I need to know you're all right, understand?" Wanda nodded. This news made her feel a little better. "Well, that's settled," her husband said contentedly. "You know, I've changed my mind about going to the theater tonight. I think we've had enough emotions for the evening. How about I give you the tranquilizer the doctor prescribed, and then we'll go to bed a bit early? Sound good? Wanda thought for a moment and agreed. She was truly emotionally drained. Her husband assured her that her suspicions didn't offend him. He understood her, after all. Living without a past was so stressful. After giving the injection to his wife, Nicandro let out a sigh of relief as she slipped into a peaceful sleep within a few minutes. That evening, for the first time, he realized that he and Wanda had a long journey ahead before she would fully accept that her true place was in this house and in his heart. That same night, Wanda had a very strange dream that she couldn't shake from her mind afterward. In the dream, she couldn't figure out where exactly she was. Everything around her was engulfed in bright orange flashes. The woman couldn't breathe properly due to the smoke that had filled her lungs. Bitter and acrid, the smoke wrapped around all objects, as Wanda, the businessman's wife, struggled futilely to reach them and save them from the encroaching danger. She could feel on her skin that it was getting hotter and hotter, but she saw no way out of the smoky space. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, two blurry figures appeared before her. Wanda couldn't make out their exact appearance, but she felt that one of them, the taller one, was a man, while the other, smaller figure clearly belonged to a child. Wanda! She heard a strong male voice ahead of her. Where are you, Wanda? The voice repeated her name again and again. Wanda tried to quickly shout, I'm here, but not a single sound escaped her throat. In desperation, she clutched her own neck and suddenly heard a piercing child's voice. Mom, Mommy, answer, Mommy. Wanda started to flounder in the blinding, fiery mist, trying to reach or at least get closer to the ethereal figures calling her. She felt in her soul that she absolutely had to signal to them that she was here, that she was alive, and that everything was all right. However, the hazy silhouettes receded further the closer Wanda tried to get to them. Finally, overwhelmed by a sense of inhuman desperation, the woman screamed into the void, watching the figures retreat, dissolve into smoke. Wait, hold on. Please, don't leave me here. No, don't. I want to be with you. Wanda, wake up. Nicandro called out. In that moment, Wanda opened her huge blue eyes. It turned out she had been lying in her own bed all along, and her husband was sitting beside her, leaning over her, shaking her shoulders forcefully to wake her up. It was evident that her husband was worried and sad. What happened to you, Wanda? What did you see? Still not fully awake from what she had just seen, his wife just shook her head, pushing her husband's hands away from her. Everything's fine, Nicandro, nothing serious. I just had a nightmare. The young woman struggled to catch her breath and gave her husband an affectionate look. Don't worry. Give me a couple of minutes, okay? Turning to her other side, Wanda tried to regain control over the overwhelming emotions. The dream had been so vivid and realistic that she couldn't shake off the thought that it might have been a memory. But of what? And why hadn't she seen Nicandro in this strange dream? As if he had been absent from it entirely. You screamed so loudly, Nicandro slowly spoke in the meantime. Are you sure you don't need a sedative? I could bring you some pills if you want. Wanda looked at her husband with genuine surprise. Are you serious, dear? Sedatives at 10 in the morning? Are you trying to turn me into a half-dead thing? Nicandro tensed for a moment, but Wanda burst into laughter, playfully tossing a pillow at him. Oh, I was just joking, silly. Of course, I don't mean anything like that. But really, it's just a bad dream. There's no need to pop a pill every time I experience emotions. Nicandro smiled, not out of joy but as if he felt guilty about something. However, he quickly pretended like nothing had happened. He suggested to his beloved wife that they have coffee together. Mom even baked tzatziki for us this morning before heading to work. No matter how long I live, I'm always amazed by her incredible ability to combine being a homemaker and a businesswoman. Oh, how embarrassing, Wanda said, pressing her hands to her face. I was supposed to get up earlier and prepare everything. Instead, your mom had to work in the kitchen too. Nicandro just waved his hand and then gently kissed his wife on the cheek. You simply don't know her like I do. In reality, all this culinary activity, pots and pans, has always been a source of joy for her. Before my dad passed away, she was just a housewife for quite a while. She raised me, took care of my father when he came home from work. And then, when my dad died from a heart attack, she seriously got into business. Dad left us an inheritance. She used it and opened her first beauty salon. Wanda looked at her husband with genuine interest. It was the first time he shared so openly about his family. I was still a young kid back then, just 17 years old. At first, I couldn't accept this new version of my mom. But then she explained to me that in this life, you have to fight for what's yours until the end, to sink your teeth into it, and not to give up. So, I started studying economics at the university and then got a job at a bank. And gradually, I made a name for myself, and that's when I met you. Nicandro hugged Wanda tenderly, and she allowed him to kiss her for real this time. At some point, she thought that the dream that had haunted her might truly have been just a meaningless nightmare. A couple of hours later, as her husband was getting ready for work, Wanda's phone suddenly erupted with persistent ringing. Glancing at the screen, she was surprised to see that some unknown number was calling her. Answer it, Nicandro advised her, slipping on his jacket. I'm sure you'll be happy about who's calling. Really? Wanda raised an eyebrow and answered the incoming call. Wanda, is that you? She heard a squeaky, unfamiliar female voice. Yes, this is Wanda Castro, Wanda replied, looking at her husband in confusion. Who's speaking? The caller paused for a moment, then, with the same high-pitched voice, she said indignantly. No, Wanda, Nicandro told us that you're having memory issues, but I didn't think it was too serious. Wanda looked at her husband again with a mute question, who is this? But he just winked at her and pointed to his watch. In a hurry, he whispered with his lips only. Have fun there. After that, her husband left for work, leaving Wanda utterly bewildered. She remembered that Patricia was supposed to come home in about half an hour to visit her and make sure everything was okay. So, who was she supposed to have fun with? With her mother-in-law or with the person who had just bombarded her phone? The caller, however, continued attacking Wanda with relentless questions. Listen, are you serious? You really don't remember Katerina and me? It's me, Alba Santos, your best friend. Nicandro told us not to approach you while you're undergoing treatment. We've been going crazy during this time. And then yesterday, he messaged us and told us to take you out to the city. Can you imagine? Well, he's always been Mr. Spontaneity. Sorry for being so frank. Wait, Alba. Stop, Wanda tried to calm her down. Are you saying that we were friends once? Before the accident, I mean. Are you my friend? The best one, she confidently declared. Then, after a moment, she added, No, I mean, you're also friends with Katerina Iglesias, but not as good as with me. Feeling uneasy about another person entering her life whom she couldn't remember at all, Wanda suggested to Alba that they meet in the city center at the same cafe they used to go to with her husband. She wanted to talk to this girl and try to remember her. After all, Alba insisted that they had known each other for many years. However, the meeting with her friend only saddened Wanda, if not more, disappointed her. Not only did she not remember anything about the things this girl was telling her, but Alba turned out to be an extremely unpleasant person. Wanda couldn't believe she had trusted this nasty, jealous girl with all her secrets. She would never have shared anything with such a gossip girl. While they were in the cafe, Alba managed to badmouth all their mutual acquaintances with Nicandro. And even though Wanda hadn't even met half of them in person, she felt offended that Alba was so unabashedly tarnishing everyone's reputation. So, you're saying we work together in the modeling business? Wanda asked at some point, trying to interrupt Alba's endless dirty tirade. For a moment, Alba fell silent, as if her internal computer had trouble processing that simple question. Finally, she smiled uncertainly. Wanda, don't you remember our shows in Milan either? How did we discuss that famous model? She looks so stunning in all the magazines, but in reality, she's just a fat blob. I'm still amazed that agents saw potential in her. She's really a monster. She let out an unpleasant laugh, revealing her large, white teeth. Meanwhile, Wanda continued to stir the remains of her milkshake in the tall glass with a straw, lost in thought. Which one would I prefer, to dogs or cats? Wanda asked again. What? Her friend blinked with her long, heavily mascaraed lashes and stared at her. What does that have to do with cats? Wanda looked closely at the girl. But this is such a simple question. You say you've known me almost since school. Then you can't know which animals I love more. All best friends easily answer such questions, especially when some of them have memory problems. One thing Wanda definitely didn't expect was for Alba to suddenly pull out her mobile phone out of nowhere and start frantically typing something to someone. What are you doing? Wanda asked with a smile. She wouldn't have been surprised if Alba had posted something nasty about her on the internet, but she didn't care. She just wanted to understand what was going on. Alba finished fiddling with her smartphone and, with an apologetic grin that was meant to pass for a smile, said, Wanda, they've urgently called me for a shoot. I'd love to chat more with you, but unlike you, I don't have a rich husband, so I have to work my buttocks off. Alba quickly got up from the table and gave Wanda an air kiss. Don't be upset, Wanda, we'll definitely chat later. And who knows, maybe you'll feel better. Ciao, darling. Catch you later. With these words, the redhead gossip girl flitted away from the cafe like a bright but silly butterfly. Wanda couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong with Alba. She just couldn't believe that she had chosen such a mercenary person as her friend. Moreover, Alba definitely didn't know the answer to her question. And all this fuss with the phone? She was just looking for an excuse to leave quickly and not delve into slippery topics. But what could it mean? Wanda was lost in conjecture. She had too many questions about her own past, and she hadn't received an answer to any of them yet. Hearing her own phone vibrating in her purse, she immediately picked it up. Hello, darling, how are you? Nicandro asked, calling from work. To be honest, not very well, his wife admitted. I didn't like this Alba at all. What kind of friend is she, who's only interested in fashion and gossip? Really? Her husband tensed up. You don't have to socialize with her if you don't want to. I just thought that spending time with old acquaintances might be good for you. You said it yourself. Yes, I remember, Wanda hastened to reassure him. It's just that this meeting turned out to be not as heartwarming as I imagined. I'm going home now. Patricia's already there. I could make something original for dinner for all of us today. They chatted a bit more about household matters, after which Wanda hung up and walked home. She wanted to take a leisurely stroll, be alone with her thoughts, and simply relax in silence after Alba's venomously rapid chatter. The weather that day was simply wonderful. Spring was in full swing. Apple trees were blooming everywhere, flower beds were bursting with blossoms, and the air was filled with the fragrance of floral herbs. Wanda lingered for a couple of minutes in one of the courtyards near the playground. Watching the happy little children play in the sandbox, Wanda felt an overwhelming wave of melancholy. It's such a shame that Nicandro and I don't have our own little one. I could be sitting here right now, watching over our son or daughter. Maybe that would make me feel much more at ease. The young woman sat down on a bench, enjoying watching the kids play. Some of them were happily swinging on the swings, while their mothers looked proudly in Wanda's direction. It seemed they thought envious, look what happiness it is to have a child. Suddenly, Wanda felt a sudden chill in her hands and feet. In her mind, something seemed to switch, and she vividly, as if in reality, saw herself cradling a small child in her arms. The newborn was peacefully sleeping, its eyes closed. At that moment, Wanda was absolutely sure that she was holding her own son. However, the vision didn't end there. She felt strong and gentle arms embrace her from behind. Wanda turned around to look at the child's father, and it was indeed him, she had no doubt. To her immense surprise, she saw someone entirely different from Nicandro. A short, broad-shouldered, handsome man with deep, dark green eyes and golden brown hair that differed from her husband's image. Nicandro was stocky, a brunette, slender, but slightly taller than herself. This stranger seemed to resemble a hero from ancient tales. Wanda didn't know the handsome man or the child she was holding. However, she was convinced that both of them had a direct connection to her. Could it be that Nicandro was hiding something from her? Could it be possible that she had a different family before him? But then, where were they? What happened to them? Intrigued, Wanda hurried home immediately. She eagerly awaited her husband's return so that they could discuss her vision. Patricia noticed that Wanda was agitated, so she became anxious herself. She asked her daughter-in-law to sit in the kitchen and tried to quickly ask her what had happened and how the meeting with her friend went. However, at that moment, Wanda was not inclined to have heart-to-heart conversations with her mother-in-law. "Sweetie, is there something I can help you with?" the businesswoman asked, looking into Wanda's eyes. "I'm afraid only Nicandro can help me here," she sighed. "I really need to have a serious talk with him." A shadow crossed the well-groomed woman's face, and its nature was impossible to determine. The young woman claimed that she needed some rest, and then she went upstairs to her room. Later that evening, when Nicandro returned home, Wanda immediately called him and honestly told him about her sudden memory. After hearing his wife, the businessman was initially taken aback, but he quickly composed himself. Wanda was amazed at how rapidly his expressions changed on his face. In a matter of moments, she could discern surprise, anger, bewilderment, and then an unruffled calmness that concealed all other emotions. "Wanda, dear, listen to me very carefully," her husband began, seating her on the bed. "What you're talking about is impossible." "But why?" She looked at him with confusion. "Nicandro, I feel like these people are somehow connected to me, and very strongly at that. The emotions, the image, it felt so real, so familiar. If there's something about myself that I don't know, you have to tell me." Nicandro covered his face with his hands, as if trying to shield himself from his own feelings. "The doctors warned me that these kinds of consequences are possible," he slowly said. "You spent too much time in a coma, and part of your brain still remains incompletely recovered." "What do you mean, Nicandro?" Wanda asked him again. "What's wrong with me?" Her husband looked at her with sadness, even a hint of guilt. "Forgive me, Wanda. I should have told you about all of this sooner." "About what? Can you explain it to me?" Her husband gently took Wanda's hands. "It's hallucinations. The doctor said that it's a possible aftermath of being in a coma." Wanda didn't immediately grasp what her husband was telling her. When it finally sank in, she shook her head in disbelief. "No, Nicandro, no. That's the thing, it wasn't a product of my imagination. I'm certain that I saw a part of my past. But I can't figure out when it happened or who those people are to me." Nicandro looked at his wife with indescribable regret. "Darling, sometimes that's how it goes. Maybe you experienced a powerful emotional shock while looking at the children, and your mind tried to deceive you by presenting what you desired as reality." "No, no." Wanda continued to persist. "I'm saying, Nicandro, I absolutely know that I've seen these people before. Nicandro, I told you about my dream." "That nightmare?" Her husband immediately guessed. "Yes, that one," Wanda nodded. "I think I saw the same man and the same boy there. Only it was as if it happened later than the memories from the playground." Nicandro's face immediately darkened. "Wanda, let's not try to find explanations for your delusions. I'm not thrilled, of course, that you're seeing some stranger man in your visions, but when it comes to the child..." Wanda jumped off the bed, nervously gesturing with her hands. "Nicandro, I wanted to ask you something else. Why don't we have children yet? You just mentioned that the memory could have been triggered by the playing children. What did you mean?" Instead of answering, her husband slowly got up from the bed, then calmly walked over to a small medical kit and retrieved a syringe with a sedative. When Wanda saw it, she stepped back. "No, Nicandro, I don't want a sedative. Explain to me how those children and my visions are connected." "Nicandro, what are you doing?" Fear filled the young woman's eyes as her husband began to approach her, holding a prepared injection. His face was completely inscrutable. "Darling, it's all right, don't worry so much. You just need to calm down a little. Look at yourself, you're trembling." Wanda kept stepping back until she finally felt something solid behind her. It was a wall. Panic surged within her. She turned around, trying to find a way out, but in that moment, her husband abruptly grabbed her hands, depriving her of the ability to resist. "Nicandro, please, don't. I don't want this. I'm scared." Nicandro forcefully pulled his wife closer and, with a deft motion, injected the sedative into her neck. "Shush, he whispered, "don't be afraid, my dear, don't be afraid, everything's fine. I'll never let you go. We'll always be together." Wanda's vision immediately blurred. The room suddenly became foggy. When Nicandro loosened his vice-like embrace and gently laid her on the bed, the woman looked at him with an utterly vacant stare. Her body went limp, and she could no longer control it. "Nicandro," she managed to whisper in a weakened voice, her eyes silently asking, "Why?" "Darling, we don't have children because you're infertile," her husband unexpectedly said affectionately. "I didn't want to talk about it to avoid traumatizing your already fragile psyche. But now I see that we can't avoid this, Wanda. I'll have to call a psychotherapist for you tomorrow. He'll prescribe a new course of medication for you, and you'll definitely recover." "No! No!" Wanda wanted to scream, but she couldn't utter a word aloud. She didn't know what drug her husband had injected, but she was certain that it certainly wasn't a sedative. "Feels more like a tranquilizer," a thought suddenly flickered in her mind on the very distant edge of her consciousness, between dream and wakefulness. "We used to give something like this to horses on our farm." Wanda didn't have time to latch onto this thought, because suddenly everything around her plunged into darkness. She only woke up the next morning. Nicandro wasn't by her side, so Wanda cautiously slipped into the shower to wash away the remnants of sleep and the semi-conscious state caused by the strange medication. "Dear God, did I really not dream any of this?" Wanda thought, standing under the powerful streams of hot water. "Did I really remember something that Nicandro didn't like? And so he did this to me?" A wave of revulsion washed over her. Wanda recalled the horrific expression that crossed Nicandro's face when he administered the injection. "Oh God! He looked deranged. I can't stay in this house with him anymore. I need answers." Slipping out of the bathroom, Wanda got dressed and cautiously descended to the first floor. She heard Nicandro and his mother talking softly in the kitchen. To Wanda's surprise, the relatives were talking Spanish. Listening to their speech, Wanda was amazed to realize that she understood them perfectly. However, as the words gained their full meaning for her, Wanda was forced to slowly slide down the wall, sitting on the floor. Her legs refused to hold her, turning into shock-laden jelly. "I told you that you're playing with fire, Nicandro," Patricia scolded her son. "You're just mocking the girl in vain. Today she remembered her son, and tomorrow? Heaven forbid, she remembers Pablo and connects the dots. What will we do if the whole truth comes out? Keep your voice down." Nicandro snapped at her in Spanish. "I don't even know why this happened. The doctors said the effects of the drugs were 100% certain. She wasn't supposed to remember anything from her past. Nothing that happened to her before me." Patricia shook her head helplessly. "Do you even realize what you've done, son? You've broken her entire life, and you're continuing to do the same. She'll never love you, she can't. She's attached to—" "No, Mom." He was unable to contain himself and shouted loudly. "Wanda is mine and only mine. Got it? I won't lose her, and I won't let you separate us." "Stop it, Nicandro," Patricia pleaded. If you don't stop now, it will only get worse. Do you really want a wife with the memory of a fish? She'll actually go crazy soon. Are you trying to push her to that point? For a moment, they fell silent. Then Wanda heard Nicandro dialing someone's number on his phone. He never turned off the sound of his keyboard, so the numbers and letters chirped lightly every time he touched them. "What are you doing?" Patricia asked him coldly in English. "Calling Wanda's doctor," he calmly replied. "Don't you dare." His mother hissed threateningly. "I'm not going to be a part of this mess anymore. I've only put up with all of this for your sake." "Don't worry, Mom, I'll handle everything," Nicandro confidently stated, then started a conversation with someone Wanda couldn't hear anymore. However, this was enough for the woman. Holding a hand over her mouth to stifle the scream of fear, Wanda struggled to her feet and quickly limped back to her room. There, the businessman's wife hastily packed a few items of spare clothing and personal belongings into a backpack. Wanda needed to wait for the moment when Nicandro would leave for the airport. A couple of days ago, he told his wife that he was going on a very important business trip to London. This trip was Wanda's only chance to save her life. She heard her husband's footsteps on the stairs, and quickly shoving the backpack under the bed, she lay back down and pulled the blanket up to her chin, pretending she wanted to rest a bit longer. "There you are, my sleepyhead," Nicandro said with a smile as he entered the room. "It's almost 10 o'clock. It's time to get up." The man gently stroked his wife's head, and she managed to force a faint smile. Pretending she hardly remembered the previous evening, Wanda sweetly stretched and placed her hands on her husband's shoulders. She couldn't let him suspect anything, so she played her role well, even though it was against her will. "I'm leaving today, remember?" Nicandro asked her, and Wanda nodded in agreement. "Mom will look after you until the doctor arrives," her husband continued, and in that moment, cold prickles of dread ran down Wanda's spine. "Behave well and do everything the doctor tells you, okay? And I'll try to come back as soon as possible. I think in about 10 days, no more." Wanda's heart raced in her chest. 10 days. She would have almost 2 weeks to carry out her plan. "Thank you, Lord." "So long?" Wanda asked aloud, desperately portraying the role of a dutiful wife. "But I'll miss you by then." Instead of an answer, Nicandro kissed his young wife. "That's perfect," he said with a satisfied smile. "I like you this way much more. And forget about everything we talked about yesterday. I love you no matter what, with children or without." Wanda nodded in response and smiled back at him. Once the businessman had left the house, she immediately jumped off the bed and continued to gather her belongings. Taking a small amount of cash from a jewelry box and shaking out all the precious items, Wanda felt ready. Whatever her husband had in mind, if he was even her husband, Wanda had no intention of staying in this house for another minute. She would find the answers to all her questions on her own and finally discover who she was and how she ended up in this gilded cage. Seizing the right moment, Wanda slipped out through the emergency exit leading to the garage and, from there, stealthily made her way through the gate to freedom. As soon as the young woman crossed the threshold of the Castro estate, she felt happiness. Freedom. Wanda thought to herself. There's nothing better or more precious than this. Taking a bus to the city, Wanda immediately headed to an inconspicuous yet decent hostel she had managed to gather information about beforehand. She needed to hide in a place where Nicandro wouldn't find her right away. That's why any option of a hotel or upscale resort was immediately dismissed. First, she didn't have enough money to pay for a room in such places. Second, Wanda wanted to minimize using her husband's credit cards. She understood that as soon as he realized she was missing, the first thing to check would be her cards. Settling into her small room, Wanda opened her laptop and began searching for information about herself first, and then about all the psychologists in the city who used hypnotic methods in their work. As she suspected, there wasn't much information about the Castro family on the internet, with most of it focusing on Nicandro and his mother. However, Wanda did find a few posts about their wedding, but these short articles lacked details or photographs from the event. It's all so strange, Wanda thought to herself as she scrolled through the online feed of a fashionable society magazine. Usually, when someone important gets married, the journalists are all over it, but that clearly wasn't our case. Once she finished her mini investigation, the young woman switched to searching for a hypnotist. Fortunately, luck was on her side. She managed to find a private clinic where a psychology professor practiced regressive hypnosis. Changing into more suitable clothes, Wanda pretended to be a wealthy and affluent lady and headed to the address provided on the website. The psychologist turned out to be a pleasant elderly man, around 60 years old. After carefully looking at Wanda, he asked, "I apologize if I mind your business, but as a specialist dealing with issues of consciousness, I still need to know why exactly you need hypnotherapy sessions and what you're expecting from them." Wanda answered without hesitation, showing no signs of discomfort. "I want to regain my memory. About a year ago, I was in an accident and fell into a long-term coma. This led to amnesia." The professor's gray eyebrows involuntarily lifted. "Oh, really? I apologize, I didn't know. But wait, you're saying you've been out of the coma for quite a while now? Then why don't you remember anything?" Wanda hesitated for a moment, thinking about how to explain the entire situation to the psychologist. Finally, she responded, "It's not that I don't remember certain moments. The problem is that I don't remember my life before the accident. Absolutely nothing." The professor looked at her, somewhat surprised. "Is that so? But that's impossible," Wanda finished his sentence. "I meant to say, very unusual. But your word suits as well," the doctor said with a gentle smile. "There are, however, some things that come to me, but they only flash for fractions of a moment. Then they become almost intangible again," Wanda whispered quietly and proceeded to tell the psychologist about her visions and dreams. Samuel Herrero, that was the doctor's name, showed keen interest in helping Wanda, as he himself was encountering such an intriguing case for the first time. He reassured the anxious woman that hypnosis sessions were entirely safe for her psyche and that she shouldn't worry about anything. "The only thing I should warn you about," Samuel told her, "is not to expect instant results. Sometimes it can take up to 6 to 8 sessions for a person to recall and reconstruct the missing memory blocks. But sometimes it can happen almost on the first try. It all depends on the depth of the psychological trauma you seem to have suffered during the accident. It's this trauma that caused your memory to block something that still causes you pain." Wanda nodded, though she was incredibly anxious about what she might uncover. But as soon as they started their first session with the psychologist, it was Samuel's turn to be quite surprised. "Wanda, I'll be honest with you. It is the first time I have had a patient like you," he candidly confessed to the young woman. "Usually, I can retrieve something related to early childhood or youth from someone's consciousness. But you," the psychologist spread his hands and smiled, puzzled. "You're like a blank canvas, a notebook with only white, empty pages inside." Wanda felt the blood drain from her face. "Can that really be possible?" The doctor paused for a moment and then nodded. "Yes, but only if strong-acting drugs were administered to you during treatment. In sufficient amounts, they can not only erase memories but also completely obliterate the identity of the person taking them. If possible, I would like to review your medical records. It could shed light on what's been happening." Sadly, Wanda shook her head. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Samuel. The records are most likely with my husband, and let's just say we're not on the best terms right now." In response, the psychologist simply shrugged. "Well, then all we can do is hope that your memory gradually relaxes and releases all the necessary information." On that day, Wanda returned to the hostel deeply disappointed. It could be true what the doctor said. Nicandro had never told her about the methods doctors used on her to try to restore brain function. A week had passed, and she still hadn't remembered anything, even after 3 sessions. Samuel had tried various approaches, from tests to art therapy, just to trigger even the slightest hint of memories inside Wanda's mind. But all efforts were in vain. At some point, Wanda had nearly resigned herself to the idea that, for some reason, she might never remember her life before the accident. However, the doctor assured her it was too early to give up. "I'm sure we can achieve some results," the psychologist insisted. Wanda had nearly lost hope. The saddest part was that she hadn't seen the flashes anymore, the ones where the mysterious man and the little boy appeared. Could it have all just been the fruit of my imagination? She thought in despair, wiping away tears from the corners of her eyes. She wanted so much to believe that these people held the key to her identity and past life. During the third session, something strange happened. When the psychologist had already induced Wanda into a trance, a fire alarm suddenly went off in the room, and the smoke detector began emitting a piercing sound. Startled, Samuel jumped up from his chair. Wanda, however, felt a strange sensation, as if something similar had happened to her before. Since she couldn't exit the trance without the psychologist's help, she tried her best to cling to this déjà vu feeling, hoping that it might lead her to something. And it worked. The white mist that had enveloped Wanda during her hypnosis sessions suddenly began to dissipate. Before her eyes, images from the past started flickering one after another. They crashed upon her with such intense force that if it could be described physically, it felt as though a powerful surge of water was knocking her off her feet, breaking through the dam of artificial chemicals that had held it back for months. Wanda suddenly felt short of breath and tried to open her mouth wide to inhale when, in the same moment, she sensed an acrid, bitter smoke. Inhaling that smoke in her memories, Wanda finally remembered everything. Her name truly was Wanda, but her last name was not Castro, it was Blanco. And Nicandro was not her husband at all. Just a little over a year ago, she had an entirely different, absolutely happy life. Her real husband's name was Pablo Blanco, and he indeed was the broad-shouldered, handsome, wealthy man from her visions. Pablo was a businessman specializing in the agricultural sector. In simple terms, Wanda and Pablo owned a huge farm in another town as well as a small breeding laboratory where Wanda herself developed new flower varieties and some other types of plants. Wanda had never worked as a model. She remembered that she had a biological education, and she learned Spanish while she was still a student in courses 5 years ago. Even the story about Nicandro's parents was a lie. They did pass away, but not in the way he had described. There was no hiking trip involved. Wanda's mother, Agata, died of a stroke when Wanda was 19. Her father, Prudent, died much later due to an accident. He went fishing, fell through the ice, and died from hypothermia. So, there was not a single word of truth in the words of Wanda's supposed husband. "Pablo," she whispered in the trance, "Lobo, my dears, how could I have lived without you for so long? Where are you, my loved ones?" They called their little 3-year-old son Lobo, whom the Blanco spouses cherished more than anything else in the world. Pablo and Wanda could be called a perfect couple. Their life was also perfect. Until Nicandro Castro appeared in it. Wanda remembered very clearly the day when his SUV showed up on the driveway in front of their farm gates. Nicandro introduced himself as a major investor and told Pablo that he wanted to see his farm since he had heard so much about their environmentally friendly agricultural products. Pablo didn't mind showing Nicandro around the farm, but he was not enthused about the idea of a city businessman, completely unfamiliar with their trade, suddenly thinking that he could dictate terms to the Blancos based solely on the fact that he had invested a certain sum of money in their production. However, Nicandro was quite persistent. And all the while Pablo was giving him a tour, the banker painted rosy prospects for their farm entering the international market. Pablo was a very warm-hearted and decent person, and at the end of the day, he invited Nicandro to have a coffee at home. It was then that Nicandro Castro saw Wanda for the first time. The young woman, neither by word nor deed, gave the urban investor any reason to hope for something more than just hospitality and politeness. However, struck by Wanda's truly rare beauty, Nicandro firmly decided to win her away from her lawful husband. Wanda recalled that even then, his infatuation seemed more like a strange obsession. That evening, Nicandro couldn't take his eyes off Wanda, and Pablo, being far from foolish, noticed it right away. Wanda, Pablo, Nicandro bid their farewells, frequently glancing sideways at Wanda. "I think I'll drop by again next week. If you don't mind, of course. I want to show you the development plan for the farm. I'm sure you'll have every chance to become one of the most popular farming enterprises in the country in the shortest time." "Well, we'll see," Pablo responded evasively. "Let's not jump ahead, Nicandro. After all, everything you see around here belongs to me. And as the owner, I have the right to have the final say." At that moment, the tall, green-eyed man looked pointedly at Nicandro first, then at his wife. Flustered, Wanda excused herself to the kitchen, pretending that she needed to wash the dishes left by the guests. She didn't hear the rest of the conversation. However, she saw clearly through the window that when Nicandro was leaving their yard, he angrily kicked an old bucket standing there. Then, he walked to his expensive car and, getting into its cabin, slammed the door loudly behind him. When the businessman briefly raised his face, Wanda managed to see the terrifying expression that distorted his features. It was exactly the same as it was on the day he gave Wanda that horrible injection. "What did you say to him?" she anxiously asked Pablo when he entered the kitchen. She didn't like that abnormal gleam in Nicandro's eyes. "Oh, nothing special," her husband replied with a slight smile. "Don't worry, my love, it's just men's business. There's no reason for him to be offended, believe me." Wanda tightened her lace shawl around herself, watching the investor's SUV disappear in the distance. "I don't like him," Wanda honestly confessed to Pablo back then. "There's something dangerous about him." Pablo chuckled softly and pulled his wife close to him. "Don't worry, Wanda. This city slicker will come to our farm a few more times. And when he realizes he has nothing to gain here, he'll retreat back to the capital." The man was right. Nicandro did indeed come to their farm 3 more times. During their last meeting, Pablo and Nicandro had a heated argument, mostly because of Wanda. Nicandro seized the moment when Pablo wasn't around and forcefully pressed his young wife against the wall of the greenhouse, where she happened to be working that day. Before Wanda could even scream, Nicandro literally pounced on her with kisses. "Wanda, my dear, sweet one," he whispered, trying to leave numerous traces of his lips on her face, "you're the true queen. Why are you living with such a simpleton as Pablo? Come with me to the city, huh? You'll have everything you could ever wish for, cars, money, and jewels. Just be mine, Wanda. You must be mine." Wanda felt almost physically sick, trying to push away this clingy, slippery businessman. She managed to break free from his grasp and grab a nearby digging shovel. "Have you completely lost your mind, Nicandro?" Wanda exclaimed. "I love my husband, and our child is growing up. Aren't you ashamed to behave this way? My husband let you into our home, and you dare to do such awful things." Nicandro smiled, raising his hands in a conciliatory gesture. He took a step towards Wanda, but she waved the sharp edge of the shovel in front of him. "Don't come any closer." Wanda felt herself sweating from fear and disgust. "Get out of here before I tell my husband everything," she threatened. "I already know everything, dear." "I saw it all," came Pablo's voice from behind Nicandro. "What's the matter with you, Nicandro? Why are you acting like an asshole?" With these words, in a single motion, Pablo grabbed Nicandro by the collar, treating him like a pesky stray dog, and escorted the businessman into the yard, where he forcefully threw him to the ground. "What do you think you're doing?" Nicandro almost squealed, trying to get up from the ground. "How dare you? I won't leave a stone standing on your farm. I won't see you here again, you dressed-up pheasant," Pablo shouted sternly at him, "or I'll rip both your legs off and hang your body on a stick like a scarecrow in my garden. You'll scare away crows." The businessman's face displayed that same mad expression, mixed with feelings of anger and his own helplessness. "And do you really want to spend your whole life with this barbarian, Wanda?" Nicandro roared, addressing the farmer's wife. "Why spend your best years with this uncultured brute? You could be a princess, a queen. You just need to say yes to me." Nicandro screamed all this while slowly backing away from Pablo. The giant man looked at him as if a plump cockroach was crawling in front of him, a cockroach that was also trying to assert its rights, attempting to feast on the table. "You have 10 seconds to get in your car and permanently leave my farm," Pablo's voice sounded threatening. "Otherwise, you can blame yourself." "So, 10, 9. You'll still be with me, Wanda." Nicandro shouted for the last time, practically crawling into his car. "You just don't understand yet. You must be with me, Wanda, you must be mine." Pablo pretended as if he was going to strike at the businessman, but Nicandro had already started the engine and, a minute later, was leaving their yard, cursing at the farm owner. Trembling like a leaf, Wanda embraced her husband, and he comforted her for a long while, promising her that she would never see that scoundrel again. At that time, Wanda prayed for it to be true. Yet, deep inside, she still had an unsettling feeling. People like Nicandro never give up on what they desire, and soon the Blanco family had to come to terms with this fact. Just a few days later, Wanda woke up in the middle of the night when she sensed the strong smell of smoke and heard Lobo crying. Jumping out of bed, she was horrified to see 3 huge thugs in masks bursting into the room where she and her husband slept. "Lobo! Pablo!" she cried out, squinting to make out anything in the smoky room. However, there was only silence in response. Catching a glimpse through the window, Wanda was horrified to witness their beautiful wooden home being consumed by flames. Everywhere was a fiery inferno, and her husband and son were nowhere nearby. Wanda didn't understand what had happened and where her entire family was. Yet, her loud screams caught the attention of the thugs. "Ah, there she is, look," one of them hissed, slowly approaching Wanda. "Come on, grab her quickly," the second thug muttered. The boss ordered him to take her straight to the hospital. "They say they have experienced people there who will take care of her." "No!" Wanda screamed in desperation as the 2 goons roughly seized her by the arms and dragged her towards the staircase leading downstairs. Wanda resisted with all her might, but how could she overcome such brutes? "Quiet, you fool!" One of them slapped her, and Wanda involuntarily fell silent, curling up in pain. "Otherwise, you'll end up roasted here together with your fiancé, and no one will pat us on the head for that." After these words, Wanda felt something very thin and sharp pierce her neck. "A needle," she managed to think before losing consciousness. "They're trying to poison me." Wanda's memories of what happened next were very vague. Sometimes she saw the faces of doctors in white medical masks leaning over her, and at other times, Nicandro's satisfied face surfaced. Apparently, he initially drugged her, sent her to some private clinic, where they treated her so well that they completely erased the young woman's memory of her previous family and life. "Wanda!" She heard a voice through her memories. "Wanda, wake up. Listen to my voice. Wake up on the count of 1, 2, 3. Wanda abruptly opened her eyes and sat up on the leather couch where she had been lying all this time, immersed in her own memories. "Samuel, it worked. I remember everything now." Her hands trembled with excitement, but she was still happy to have regained her memory and identity. "Wanda, you were shouting so loudly while you were in a trance," the psychologist began, somewhat perplexed. "I didn't understand much of what you were saying, but it's obvious that you were having a dialogue with someone." Wanda got up, warmly thanked the elderly doctor. "Thank you, Professor. I can't explain everything to you right now, but I urgently need to go to a certain place to make sure that everything I saw is real. Just remember to come back to me again later. We need to fill out some documents regarding the work done." "Absolutely, Samuel," Wanda assured him, shaking his hand firmly. "And now, I'm sorry, but I really need to go." The psychologist couldn't hold his client back. He simply smiled and wished her luck. "I'm glad you managed to find yourself again," he said. "Me too," Wanda nodded. "If it weren't for you and that fire alarm, I don't even know what would have happened to me next." Rushing from the psychologist's office straight to the train station, Wanda waited for the first train heading to her town and hopped aboard. Arriving at her desired station, she headed straight to the bus stop and took a bus from there to her family farm. As she approached the gates of the place that had been her home for many years, Wanda's heart ached with pain and despair. Her house, all the buildings, and Wanda's personal experimental greenhouse, everything had been destroyed by fire. The fire had been so fierce that there was absolutely nothing left of the former glory of the agricultural complex, except for huge black patches of ashes and pieces of scorched earth. Kneeling before the burnt-out skeleton that had once been her home, Wanda burst into bitter tears, unable to contain the emotions that had been building up inside her for so long. The most dreadful part was that she still hadn't found out what had happened to her family, her real family. At that moment, she heard the roar of an engine nearby, and within a few minutes, she saw Nicandro's SUV standing before the half-collapsed gates of the farm. "Wanda, are you out of your mind?" An enraged Nicandro lashed out at her. "What's this supposed to mean? I should have been in London for 3 more days, but I flew back here after my mother called and told me you disappeared. She's nearly climbing the walls with worry. She's been afraid to tell you about your escape for so long. Are you enjoying the ashes?" Nicandro approached the woman and forcefully made her look at him by tugging on her arm. Wanda raised her eyes to him, dark like the sky before a storm. She slowly rose from her knees and, summoning her strength, struck Nicandro across the face. "Don't you dare," she whispered, her eyes filled with hatred as she stared at her tormentor. "Don't you dare tell me what to do. You destroyed my family." Nicandro looked at Wanda in astonishment, but she didn't let him utter a word. "Yes, I remember everything now. How could you do this to me? You're not even my husband, you're nobody. You just wormed your way into our family like a parasite, like a rat, and you destroyed everything, absolutely everything that Pablo and I had built so with such effort." Wanda began to choke on her sobs, but was determined to tell Nicandro everything she was thinking about to Nicandro. "I know there was no accident or coma. You simply handed me over to some private hospital and poisoned me with all sorts of crap to make me forget everything. Where's my family, you bastard? Where's my husband? Where's my son?" With each question, Wanda struck Nicandro with her fist against his chest, trying to channel all the pain of her shattered heart through this physical outlet. Finally, Nicandro caught both of her hands and pushed Wanda away. She fell to the ground, covered in dust and ash that seemed to have become ingrained in the local soil. "Yes, I took you away. I rescued you from this rural swamp and showed you a normal human life, because you were made for that kind of life, not for all this." Nicandro gestured around at the ruins of the farm. "If you want to know, I held on to the hope until the very end that you wouldn't try to find out anything about your past. I thought my love for both of us would be enough. But God, how wrong I was." Nicandro slowly circled around Wanda, like a predator circling its prey. "I even set fire to your house, along with your useless husband and your entire farm. I hope that if there wasn't even a reminder of who you once were, you would finally come to your senses and choose me. Me and our wonderful life together." Wanda was trembling all over, but she held on with her last ounce of strength. "You scoundrel!" she yelled at him. "I'm going to file a report against you. You'll be arrested." Nicandro only smiled unpleasantly. "No one will prove anything, my sweet." "How did you find me?" Wanda asked in desperation. "Were you tracking me?" Nicandro smirked. "I pinpointed your location through the tiny tracking device I placed in your phone. As soon as I arrived here, I headed straight for the place where you were supposed to spend these few days. When I learned that you went to a psychologist, I realized that anything could happen. So I followed you right away." The man circled around Wanda once more. "And if you're so eager to know where your child is, I'll tell you. He's in an orphanage. I just don't know which one. I ordered my people to drop off your kid to them, but I won't tell you where, so you won't have the chance to find him if things go wrong." Wanda slowly got to her feet, staring at him with all the hatred she could muster. "You're a monster." She spat at him. "We will never be together." Even if you become the last man on earth, even if you erase my memory completely, and I won't remember my own name, we will never be together. Do you hear me? Never. I hate you, and I will always feel this hatred. It's in my heart. Just like I felt that you were nothing to me. Just like I felt that I have Pablo, the man I will love with all my heart forever, even after his death. Exhausted, Wanda bent over, expecting that the businessman would probably want to kill her now. To her immense surprise, Nicandro's face twisted in an expression of genuine emotional pain. However, it only lasted a moment. Afterward, he looked at her with contempt. Fool! What a fool you are, Wanda! I gave you everything, I gave you all of me. And you, ungrateful hysteric, for some reason, delved into what you shouldn't have known at all. Nicandro forcefully kicked Wanda in the stomach, and she instantly choked from the pain. Stars flickered before her eyes. Forgive me, Wanda, Nicandro said, pulling out a gun, but you brought this upon yourself. If only you had listened to me instead of your foolish heart, everything could have been so different now. Realizing that it was inevitable she would end up there, Wanda tightly closed her eyes and whispered softly, Pablo, my dear, I'm coming to you, my love. And in that very moment, she felt a shadow pass by her. A loud crash followed, but she didn't feel anything, only shrinking in horror. Opening her eyes, she saw someone large and strong delivering blows to Nicandro one after another, knocking the gun out of his hand. You're a scum, a bastard. She heard her familiar, gentle voice. Pablo? Wanda uttered, hardly believing her ears. Could it really be you? Are you alive? Pablo, having knocked out the villainous businessman, slowly straightened up and turned to his wife. Wanda. Rushing to his spouse, he embraced Wanda tenderly, holding her tear-streaked face in his hands. It's all right, my love, everything will be all right now. I'm alive, I'm here. And him? She nodded towards Nicandro. Haven't you? Pablo just smirked mischievously. Don't worry. This bastard will live. But for now, he'd be in jail. I recorded everything on video, how he tormented you and what he said about our farm. I think the police will find that quite sufficient. Wanda cautiously stepped back from her husband. Pablo, tell me, what really happened then? How did you manage to escape? And Lobo? Did you hear what he said about our son? The man affectionately stroked her cheek and smiled gently at her. Calm down. Lobo is home. We're living in a different city now. I couldn't stay here knowing that you were gone. Well, at least that's what I thought at the time. Pablo told Wanda that he had managed to escape the burning house in the nick of time when he realized everything around him was ablaze. They knocked me out, those morons. I saw them trying to break into the house, so I wanted to give them a fight. But they were stronger, damn bastards. I woke up in the shed. Apparently, they hoped I would burn alive there. Little did they know we had a small escape hatch there. I had accidentally covered it up with garden tools. You couldn't see it from the inside. Pablo looked around to make sure Nicandro was okay, meaning unconscious. Luckily, he lay there without moving. That's how I got out of it. I smashed the glass first, and then pried the boards off to make it easier, Pablo explained to his wife. Afterward, his gaze turned incredibly sad. He hugged Wanda again, and she embraced him even tighter. I had already arranged your funeral, Wanda, he slowly said. When they extinguished the fire, all I found were your bracelet and ring. I thought you had perished in the flames. Wanda looked at Pablo with indescribable love and devotion in her eyes. No, they drugged me and took me away. Have you heard it? Yes. And he will have to answer for that in court. You'll see, her husband reassured her, his eyes blazing with righteous anger at that moment. I found our son almost immediately. I couldn't believe they were willing to kill an innocent child. Thankfully, he's safe. Pablo wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. Wanda noticed the first hint of gray in his temples. My dear, Wanda caressed his hair. Have you found our son? Have you found Lobo? These thugs aren't as smart as their owner expected them to be, her husband explained. They handed our son over to the nearest orphanage. I didn't even have to travel to another place. I went and got him right away. He was quite frightened, of course, but he's a tough kid. He said, Daddy, I was waiting for you to come for me, believing that you'd rescue me from the bad people. Wanda couldn't contain her emotions any longer, so she passionately kissed her lawful husband. Take me home, please, his wife asked. I really want to see our son and spend time with you in our new home. Pablo smiled, and tiny wrinkles gathered at the corners of his eyes. Of course, my love. But first, I'll call the police. This gentleman should be imprisoned. When the police arrived, Pablo explained everything in detail and showed them the recording. The detective was shocked to know that such an influential person as Nicandro could commit such a monstrous crime due to an obsession with a woman, even if she was as beautiful as Wanda. So that the false husband of Wanda faced a long prison term. His mother, upon learning about what happened, immediately left for another city. She no longer wanted to assist her son in his crimes. You have started all this trouble, you have made a mess of things, now you must beat the consequences, she said to Nicandro as she left. Pablo and Wanda returned to their new home in a neighboring city. Despite losing almost everything, Pablo remained optimistic. He hoped that with time, he'd be able to build a new farm for their family and start over. He still maintained connections with some of his former employees, so he had no doubt about his success. Lobo, upon learning that his mom was alive, considered it a true miracle. The little boy, now almost 5, lit a candle at home every day for his mom's health because he loved her so much and missed her greatly during the time she was effectively captive to businessman Nicandro. The Blanco family was back together and genuinely happy now. They managed to overcome trials that not every person experienced. Wanda sincerely believed that only her dedication and faith in her heart ultimately helped her remember her beloved husband and son. And they've managed to find themselves again.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.